Okay. Once again, apologies for the wait. We should be starting in a moment.
Okay, sorry about the delay, everyone. It's so wonderful to see everyone today, to have this event both in person and hybrid. I know we have lots of folks zooming in as well. And a big shout out to Stephanie Klein, our Deputy Assistant Secretary, who is organizing this wonderful event today. We have a very special panel for you today to discuss what's really a very exciting shift in the energy and climate space. And that's the transition of the transportation sector toward electrification. Thanks to all the science, the engineering that's gone into batteries here at the DOE national labs, in our universities, in research institutions around the country, around the world really. Those lithium-ion batteries keep improving, they become more efficient, they're holding more charge, and best of all, they're getting cheaper. And because of that, we're seeing a tremendous uptake in electric vehicles. In 2021, worldwide, we saw just under 7 million EVs sold around the world. And that was a doubling over just 1 year. And in 2022, we're on track to even beat that record. And really because of the historic Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, which was followed by the historic Inflation Reduction Act, we now have the tools to further lower the cost of these vehicles through consumer tax credits in particular, so more people can afford them. And those tax credits, of course, apply to both new electric vehicles and other zero emission vehicles, as well as used ones. So really exciting set of policies. Thanks to those bills, we have the tools to help people purchase electric vehicle chargers in their homes. And we have the tools to build out hundreds of thousands of charging stations across the country to really address the range anxiety. And all of this is going to facilitate the president's goal of making sure that half the cars sold in this country by 2030 are zero emission. But these bills and the president's efforts go even further than that, right? They don't just provide the tools to deploy these technologies, they make sure we're building them here at home. These bills provide grants and loans so companies can process and refine the critical materials that we need for these cars domestically. They provide tax credits so each part of the battery supply chain can be built here. And because of these historic incentives, we are already seeing major announcements by companies that are looking to the United States as the most attractive country to build out those manufacturing facilities. And so the panel we have for you today is going to dive into this exciting partnership that's forming between the federal government and the private sector to bring this critical supply chain to the United States. So with that, I'm going to turn it to our moderator, Deputy Secretary Dave Turk. He's someone who has been a real leader on the clean energy transition, both domestically and on the international stage, and we're very lucky to have him join us today. So over to you, Deputy. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ali, and I'll do this very quickly, and then we'll get into the panel and the discussion you're here, both those here physically and also virtually. Just a few points of emphasis I want to make. What we have here, I think, is an unprecedented historic opportunity to do several things at once. And I think we need to do several things at once. The world, I think, demands us to do several things at once. One, I think now with the IRA funding, with the BIL funding, we finally have a chance to have tools in our tool belt to make significant inroads on the climate change front, to really reduce our emissions at scale, at pace. I wouldn't have said that a couple years ago. It was more aspirational. Now we've got the tools, we've got the funding. I think we've got the team here, certainly at DOE, phenomenal secretary that we have, others as well, to really, really step up in the real world. Not just talk about things in the abstract, to do modeling runs, but really do things in the real world, which is incredibly, incredibly exciting. That in itself is important, that in itself is historic, but it's just not enough. Secondly, we have opportunities with communities, real communities. We're all from real communities. We all live in real communities around our country for huge, huge economic opportunities. It's incredibly exciting to hear of this new plant, this new battery manufacturing facility, et cetera, coming online. big numbers, but even more importantly, it's that impact to those communities, the people in those communities, the jobs in those communities, the economic revitalization. I think we have a huge, huge opportunity on that front. Third and related piece to that economic development opportunity is the job piece of it. And not just crappy jobs. I think I'm going to be a little bit colloquial. We can all maybe cut through the DC pleasantries. Not just crappy jobs that you have to have 4 of in order to make a living and provide food for your family, but really good jobs. The kind of jobs I think our president speaks so eloquently about, job not just being a paycheck, but it's being your self-worth. It's the kind of thing that you can feel good about providing for your family along those lines. We also have a variety of communities around our country who are struggling, who have gotten screwed in the past. Again, I'm going to dismiss with the DC pleasantries. It's an afternoon here, a busy day, busy week already. Who've gotten screwed in the past, either environmental justice issues, communities that have had big industries, and those industries are now having challenges and they need some help. And I think it's perfectly appropriate to be thinking about all of that. The way I think this all comes together, and Brian Deese, our top economic advisor for the president, has spoken very eloquently about this. Our secretary, coming from Michigan and all the good work that she's done, I think has implemented a lot of this in her previous life and her current life. It all comes down to me on something we can call modern industrial strategy. It's not industrial strategy that the communists would do or Russia or others. It's a public-private partnership. It's trying to be smart. It's trying to be targeted. It's trying to be efficient. It's trying to achieve all these policy objectives using the tools that we have in the tool belt. So I'm particularly excited that we've got a panel here today of experts to really drill down on that in the electric vehicle space in particular, one of the most exciting opportunities that I think that we have. So without further ado, let's introduce the panelists and let's get on with the discussion, if that sounds good. So I think I'm supposed to do that. All right, so we've got several folks here in person. We've got Keith Phillips, who's the CEO of Piedmont Lithium. Thank you very much, Keith, for being here. We've got Tracy Klaus, the Director of Government Relations for Cummins. Tracy, thank you very much. We also have some folks virtually, although we have Mike Abelson. Mike, who I think I see you on the screen there. If so, wave, perfect. Who's the North America CEO of Arrival. And we have Rod Colwell, the CEO of Controlled Thermal Resources. All right. And we have Andre Welch, who's the Director of Government Relations for Ford Motor Company. All right, I think I see him there as well. All right, perfect. Looks like we've got everybody, and then we've got my excellent co-moderator as well, and a huge thanks for CalSTART more generally for working with us today. We also have a colleague of mine. He's sort of from the Department of Energy. He's from the Department of Transportation too. He's Gabe Klein, who's the head of our joint office with the Department of Transportation on electric vehicles and really building out that charging infrastructure, but more broadly as well. So it's a pleasure to have you all with you. I'm going to start, and then my co-moderator will also get involved here. We'll try to have these interventions be short, dynamic. Let's get to the substance of the matter and have plenty of opportunity for some spontaneity if we could. The question I wanted to ask, and I think this is a good foundational question, is to level set of where we've been, where we are, and where we're going, and really want to start on the where we've been. And if I can ask each of you, especially our private sector folks, where the U.S. market stood 2 years ago. So there's been a lot that's happened over the last 2 years, and my hope is there's a lot more that happens over these next couple-year period of time. But if you can look 2 years ago within your own corner of the EV market, and where were we? Where were we in comparison to other countries out there? And let's ask the automakers to weigh in first. So Mike, Andre, Tracy, if I could go to you all first, and then Rod and Keith after that. And again, let's try to keep this really tight so that we can get to a bunch of questions and really have a good lively discussion here. So first, Mike, over to you.
All right, thanks, Deputy Secretary. And first, thanks very much to DOE for letting us participate today on this very important topic. And I'm a part of Arrival. Arrival is a manufacturer, will be a manufacturer of electric commercial vehicles. And importantly, to your question, we're headquartered in London. And I have to admit that a couple of years ago, as I sat in London in the headquarters and looked at what the EU was doing versus what was happening in the US, I really felt like we were behind. And I'll look forward to answering the next question as far as where we are today. But a couple of years ago, I would have focused the business here in Europe.
Yeah, and I'll jump in next. This is Andre Welch with Ford Motor Company, and we are electrifying or let me first say thank you for inviting me here. Really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this panel. To your question, so Ford is electrifying our iconic models, so our Mustang Mach-E, our F-150 Lightning, our E-Transit, and so we operate in several areas, being a full-size manufacturer. So what did we see, or where was the EV market 2 years ago? Looking at the EV Outlook report published by the International Energy Agency, what you'll see is 2 years ago, I have to say that the U.S. was in neutral or maybe more accurately in reverse. We were roughly, in terms of market share, about 2.5% of the vehicles were EVs, while in China the number was closer to 10% or 5%, and in Europe it was double that at 10%. So there's definitely been a lot of change in these recent couple of years, and we can talk about some of the reasons why. But definitely in the 2020, 2019 timeframe, we were not headed in the right direction.
Thanks, Andre, and I know we'll come back to you with a question just to preview a little bit where things are going in the future. And you mentioned being in neutral. The one thing that's really good about electric vehicles, for those who have an electric vehicle, is the acceleration is very quick. So hopefully the acceleration in the market will be very quick as well. But Tracy, over to you. And thanks for everyone keeping these answers very short so we can get to a bunch of stuff, and John can get in as my co-moderator as well.
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate it. And I'm from Cummins, and for those of you who don't know Cummins, we're the world's largest independent engine manufacturer, which means that we are traditionally in diesel and natural gas engines for big trucks. Of the trucks you see on the road, about half of them have a Cummins engine, but almost all of them have a Cummins component. And so whatever the EV market was a few years ago for cars, it was much further behind that in trucks. And I'd say at Cummins, we consider ourselves a technology company, and we are always looking at what's next and how can we improve and how can we reduce emissions down to zero, which is our goal for all of our products, facilities, and operations by 2050. And we were still doing R&D experiments, science experiments, low TRL levels, and making bespoke systems for bespoke customers. And now, and I'm sure we'll get more to this, but it's really been a sea change due to all of the things that we've talked about, the IIJA, the IRA, but wherever you see cars going, trucks are a different problem to solve in a different market, and I think because of that, we're looking at some different solutions, more solutions, and we need all the same partnerships that cars have. So a lot to talk through and a lot of opportunity.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Rod, over to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Deputy Secretary. It's a privilege to be here. So 2 years ago, we've been involved in this project for over 10, but 2 years ago, really, demand was minimus. We've been dealing with the likes of our friends at Ford and GM, Stellantis for some time. It was difficult, I guess, for the auto industry at the time to try to predict the take-up to where it's been. I don't think anyone ever got that one right. It's been quite unbelievable. But 2 years ago, really, the cost of producing lithium was more expensive than what we could effectively sell it for. 2 years ago, there was no consideration to environmental impacts at all whatsoever. It was wherever you could get it cheapest, and really the go-to point was China when it come to using a third party or an OEM to source materials. It didn't matter where it come from or which country or what type of environmental impact was behind that. It's very different today. Thank you.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable. 2 years is not that long a period of time, although these last 2 years with COVID have seemed like an awful long period of time, but remarkable amount of progress and change. Keith, over to you, and then we'll begin a second round of questions.
Sure. Well, thank you. You referred to the acceleration of EV, so instant torque. I think in the last couple of years, you've seen that in the EV business in the U.S. We were really nowhere 2, 3, 4 years ago. Europe was where everything was happening. That's where all the Asian investment was going for battery plants and cathode plants. And in the last year or so, there's just been explosive investment here, which has been great. From our perspective, we're going to produce lithium in the U.S. and North Carolina and Tennessee. And people may not know, if you go further back from the 1950s to the 1980s, all the lithium in the world came from North Carolina. So it's really where the industry was invented, and we're looking forward to bringing that back. Right now, over 85% of the lithium hydroxide in the world is produced in China. The car companies around the world really have to rely on them today with the growth they're having, and we hope to displace some of that here in the U.S.
Well, thanks for that, Keith. And let's pivot with you first, if I could, about where we're headed. And you got into that a little bit, and I'll go to Andre and Tracy and others as well. So in October of this year, just a couple months ago, less than that actually, DOE announced that Piedmont Lithium would be one of the first battery manufacturing grant award winners going forward from the infrastructure bill. This was part of $2.8 billion significant investment that was given. It's a first round. We'll have more coming out, which is terrifically exciting. Love if you can talk, as I kind of framed up at the outset, not just in terms of what it means for your company, but would love to hear that too, but what it means for good paying, high quality jobs, what it means for the communities in which you're working in Tennessee, et cetera, and what kind of workforce development needs are we looking at and we need to develop as we have this EV instant torque momentum going forward?
Well, I think you referred earlier to these will be high-paying jobs, certainly in our business. I'm sure all the other businesses as well. Upstream jobs, chemical plant jobs, battery plant jobs, car plants. So we're going to need a lot of people trained up. We're fortunate in Tennessee where we're moving to be moving into an area in eastern Tennessee in the city of Etowah in McMinn County where a large foundry shut down earlier this year, laid off 700 people. We're going to hire 150 or so of those people and others, pretty soon out there, and receiving that grant. And thank you, by the way, we're very grateful. Was a big boost. I was an investment banker for 30 years before I took this job. Funding lithium projects isn't easy. It's a new business. I mean, it started 70 years ago in North Carolina, but in terms of the scale today and the amount of money we need to raise to put our projects together, $600 million for Tennessee. There's not a lot of precedent of successful project financing for that kind of business. So government support, I think, is uniquely beneficial for projects like ours.
Well, thanks for that. And we have a phenomenal group of colleagues here at DOE. All of our grants, when we do out the competitions and the funding opportunities, it goes through a very rigorous process, incredible expertise trying to figure out where the biggest opportunities are, where the biggest bang for bucks are. I feel really proud of working that in a way that the integrity of the process, integrity of the system, and it's nice to hear the real world ramifications of that excellent work going on. Andre, let me come back to you, and I previewed the question a little bit as well, and you got into this in your first answer. You guys have some big decisions, big plans to increase manufacturing operations right here in the U.S. Obviously, things have changed quite a bit over the last couple-year period of time. We've got the bipartisan infrastructure legislation, we've got the Inflation Reduction Act and all the tax incentives, and we've still got some work to do on that front, et cetera, et cetera. I'd love to just understand with you and at Ford, how's that impacted your decision-making as you look forward in terms of your scale, your ambition, how you're approaching the opportunity space?
Yeah, so I really appreciate the question and particularly how it's framed, because that's exactly how we see it. At Ford, we've made a really big bet on electrification, planning to invest $50 billion in the 22 to 26 calendar year timeframe, focus on vehicles, chargers, facilities, and we've got an ambitious and aggressive goals. 200,000 EVs by the end of 23, getting to a 2 million vehicle per year run rate by 2026, and reaching 40 to 50% market share by 2030. So the timing is quick. This is upon us right now, and why are we doing that? Because transition to electrification requires long lead time. Like developing vehicles is a 5, 6, 7 year prospect. So you've got to commit, you've got to anticipate where the market is and deploy those funds. When we developed the Mach-E and the F-150 Lightning, we opened them up for reservation. We had a certain estimate for the capacity that we would need, and the reservations doubled and tripled that. That was eye-opening for us. It showed us that the market was ready for electrification, that this is the technology of the future, and we needed to take every action to break constraints. So, as you mentioned, we are investing in our Blue Oval SK battery park in Kentucky, or in Tennessee, I'm sorry, in our Blue Oval City in Tennessee. It's a $11.1 billion investment, 5,000 jobs in Kentucky, 6,000 in Tennessee. We're training the workforce to develop these batteries that will be used in our Blue Oval City for our future Ford and Lincoln electric vehicles. We're committed to the community, doing the training and providing those good paying jobs. And this is all complemented by the IIJA and IRA. The NEVI program, putting out the important charging infrastructure, is going to make sure that consumers support these vehicles when they're available. We've heard several times about range anxiety. We've done ride and drives where, though the participants have enjoyed the vehicle, their response to us is, well, maybe once we see more chargers, then we'd be willing to make that investment. Additionally, we know to get to the levels we have to get to, we've got to bring down costs and break those constraints. And so the incentives as it relates to used vehicles, clean vehicles, charging infrastructure, manufacturing that are in the Inflation Reduction Act, all of that complements what we're doing and is a significant factor as we look to source materials for the battery plants that I spoke of earlier.
Well, thanks very
Deputy
much.
Secretary,
Yeah, please jump in.
yeah, I'd like to add as far as Arrival, because some of the work of the administration has had a very definite impact on our business plan. As I mentioned, our first product is a last mile delivery van. You can see it on my background. And our business plan up to a few months ago had been to introduce that vehicle in Europe, with the first factory being in the UK. In our last quarter business update, we announced we're actually moving now to introduce the vehicle first in the US. And our first factory will be in Charlotte, North Carolina, just down the road from Keith and Piedmont Lithium, I should say. And the tax incentives for the commercial vehicles, up to $40,000 for the vehicles that we're looking to produce in North America, were a huge factor in our decision to start prioritizing the US over Europe as far as our business plan.
Well, thanks for coming in, Mike. And I should say, if any of our panelists want to jump in, let's have this be a good conversation. So thank you for doing that, Mike, and congratulations on the project, and great to hear about the real world tangible progress accelerated by some of these historic pieces of legislation, and certainly what we're trying to do in DOE. And to Andre's point, I think we'll get to you, Gabe, in a few minutes on what we're trying to do on the charging front too, so that we can get the chicken and egg and get all pieces moving forward along those lines. Let me turn, if I could, to Tracy, just to talk a little bit more on the medium and heavy duty vehicle side of things. There are some different challenges here. You got into that a little bit in your opening comments. Just love to get your take on how we should be thinking about this in terms of the public and the private, the government and the industry piece. How do we all try to help accelerate some real progress here?
There we go. Well, thank you. That's a great question, and I'll say at Cummins, those are the questions we're thinking through every day. And we're still really excited about all of the opportunity to decarbonize medium and heavy-duty trucking. And I mentioned that there may be more than one solution, and by that I mean, there's battery electric, but we also think that there's a big opportunity for fuel cell electric vehicles in the heavy-duty space. And so, in the vein of all these exciting announcements due to the IRA, we recently announced our hydrogen electrolyzer manufacturing facility in Fridley, Minnesota, which will produce up to 500 megawatts of electrolyzers in the first phase, with the opportunity to go to a gigawatt. And that's over 100 new employees to start, and again, with the opportunity to grow. And one of the reasons we've made that investment is because we see a huge opportunity for hydrogen to decarbonize these hard-to-abate sectors. And the good news there is when you have hydrogen and you're using fuel cells to turn that hydrogen back into power on vehicles, those vehicles also need batteries. So we continue to work up scale on the battery front because a lot of those, and you mentioned delivery vans, and that's where, we see buses. I'll say at Cummins, we have deployed more than 6,200 battery modules and power more than 500 battery electric school buses with Bluebird and transit buses with Gillig here in the U.S. So buses are absolutely a critical market that we think is ready to transition to electric, and we're doing our part there. And we've deployed more than 2,000 hydrogen fuel cells, and in fact are powering the world's first passenger carrying fuel cell train in Germany right now, and really trying to deploy that technology so that we can also use it in heavy-duty trucking, and we can get it performing to the point that it will serve all of our customers. So the challenges, of course, same as everyone else on the infrastructure side and the deployment side. And you talked about how industry and government can come together. And I think, the Department of Energy is really the bastion of how to do that successfully. So we've partnered for years through the 21st Century Truck Partnership with DOE on deploying new technologies, traditionally on internal combustion powered vehicles, but looking at the future in battery electric and fuel cell vehicles, and also looking to partner on, other projects, whether that's batteries, fuel cells, hydrogen hubs, to continue to deploy these technologies and work with the department in these hard-to-abate sectors where it really will take all of our combined brain power. And I'll just, one final note is that we had a chief technical officer who used to say at Cummins, we can put one PhD on every project, but when we work with DOE, everyone at the national labs is a PhD, so you just get so much brain power. So I like to share, it's one of the most fruitful collaborations we have at Cummins.
Well, thanks very much for that, Tracy. And what I'm struck by is you need to bring all the pieces of the puzzle together, including and most importantly, the human pieces of the puzzle. And having folks come at from the industry perspective, different industries, different companies, having our lab folks, having our DOE headquarter folks, it's a pretty powerful combination if we can do it in the right way, the efficient way, the way we've been talking about here all along. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to John, my co-moderator. Thank you, John, for your patience. Now is your chance to ask questions, but I'm going to ask a question of you first before you start asking questions, if I could take the prerogative on that front. And I can't resist, given not only CalStart's phenomenal record of accomplishment, but your own personal expertise and the public-private part of it and the partnership piece of it. At COP27 not too long ago, we announced a new MOU to really try to make progress on the medium and heavy-duty vehicles by 2030, 30% zero-emission sales by 2030, 100% by 2040. That's impressive numbers. A lot of these numbers are impressive, and 2030 is not that many years off. Andre mentioned 2026. That's not even closer, right? We're almost in 2023 time period. I'd love to know your perspective so far, the impact of the public-private partnership, the kinds of MOUs, the kinds of trying to bring folks together, and then certainly you're then have the floor to ask questions of our fellow panelists here.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy Secretary Turk. It was really exciting. I was over in Egypt for the COP27 talks. I was there at the U.S. Center when Secretary Granholm announced that the U.S. was joining an existing MOU that we had last year. Coming into the COP, we had 16 nations signed up, and they had committed to those targets and were working together. This year at COP, with the U.S. stepping up along with 8 other countries, so we now have a total of 26, it makes a big difference. That is global leadership when the United States is really the largest economy in the world says we're going to commit, we're going to work with the other countries to make this happen. So that's real leadership, and I think the Secretary was able to take advantage of all the successes of the last 2 years. The IIJA, the incredible investment in electric buses and electric transit buses, infrastructure, which Gabe will talk more about. All that was made, the announcement by the Secretary was made possible because of all that great work leading up to it. And the fact that now in the U.S. we have a $40,000 tax credit, the first ever for zero-emission trucks. So that all of a sudden makes the business case for a wide array of trucks much more credible and positive than it did before. So really appreciate the leadership there, and thank you so much to the whole Biden administration for that. And now we're looking forward to the U.S. working with the DOE to step up and make sure that all 26 countries are on track to hit the 2030 targets. And we look forward to working with your team to do that. But Gabe, really want to hear from you as stepping in as the first head of the Joint Program Office in this incredible collaboration between DOE and DOT. You've got this small little task of setting up 500,000 EV chargers around the country. How's it going?
Great. It's going really well. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay.
No.
There we go. Thank you, Michael. It's an incredible challenge. But I always say, like, nothing easy is worth doing. And I'm so inspired to be in this role because it's really about breaking down silos. It's taking an all-of-government approach. It's taking a public-private approach. It's taking sort of an all-of-society approach to reinvent the economy around renewable energy. And it's interesting. I was just in a meeting before this, and we were talking about the state DOTs don't traditionally work with the utilities. Mm-hmm. To be honest, they don't traditionally work with the state energy departments that much. So this is forcing much needed collaboration. And what this administration is doing, which I think is so important, is it's going out, and actually Michael and I were talking about this morning, this same topic this morning, going out and setting really aggressive goals, and then also providing the funding, the technical expertise from the labs, know-how in terms of how to undertake new types of contracting. And so, I think what we're doing is we're putting $7.5 billion out on the streets, and that's $5 billion in formula funds, which is money that flows through the states. They get funding every year, and so they sort of know what they're getting, and that's to build the national highway network of DC fast chargers. But then there's also going to be $2.5 billion coming out soon, and that money is going to be split between discretionary grants for corridor charging and for community charging, which is, could be towns, reservations, cities. And so we're going to see a lot of different use cases coming to the fore. It's going to be very, very exciting. I think, the private sector plays an absolutely crucial role here. The magic that I've seen over the last 8 weeks is, this administration and DOE and DOT have incredible expertise, policy expertise, technical expertise, willing to reach out, talk to the private sector. But the private sector is going to build and operate most, if not all, of this system. And there will be different companies and different operators. And so some of our technical expertise actually is going to the private sector also. And there's other offices within DOE, for instance, like the Vehicle Technologies Office that we're working with, or the LPO office. And so, this really is a massive sort of undertaking. And what's inspiring to me also, Deputy Secretary Turk and I and Deputy Secretary Trottenberg were out in California a few weeks ago, and we met with, I think it was 10 or 11 companies, had a business roundtable, and some of the companies were 2 years old, millennial, minority owned, and we're in all 50 states already. And so when you think about the jobs that this is going to create, yes, it's going to be the subcomponents for the chargers and the batteries, and it's the chargers themselves and all that, but it's also the operations and maintenance on an ongoing basis. And there's all kinds of opportunities to upskill people as well. So there are people getting certified in electrification for mechanical, for vehicles, or for chargers. And so I just think, I mean, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I think we're taking advantage of it in the federal government. We see the private sector around us 100% engaged and ready to go. And so it's really a magical time. But I think next year you're going to see a lot of action from our office, our sister offices from DOT as well, and a lot of money starting to flow out.
Any quick guesses on, by the end of '23, how many chargers will have been deployed?
Well, right now we're working on the notice of proposed rulemaking, which is setting a lot of those minimum standards, interoperability, payment systems, uptime. So I think, you know, between that and Buy America, a lot of folks are formulating their RFPs, and I think we'll start to see them come out first quarter. Ohio already put one out, but I think the majority of them will come out first quarter. And then we hope to see chargers going in 2023, and then even more in 2024.
Great.
We should have had Gabe's compensation be per charger that he deploys, and then he gets a royalty for it. We should have rethought that.
As long as I get to make a lot of decisions, yeah.
Okay. Mike, from a commercial vehicle manufacturer perspective, the infrastructure bill, at least the first $5 billion, is really oriented toward light-duty infrastructure. Do you see your fleet, your customers being able to tap into that? And then if not, do you have some suggestions for the Department of Energy on the remaining $2.5 billion and how that might be allocated?
Yeah, thanks for the question, because charging is obviously a crucial component of shifting to electric vehicles. And many of the very large logistics companies obviously have substantial financial resources to install the new infrastructure, but they tell us that they're spending as much on infrastructure as they are on actually the electric vehicles themselves. So it just gives you an indicator of how important the infrastructure is. And the majority of the commercial vehicle fleet is actually run by small and medium enterprises, fleets less than 25 vehicles. And I think that public charging infrastructure is going to be crucial to move those businesses to electric vehicles. So I would encourage DOE to continue to look for ways to move commercial vehicles to electric vehicles through additional charging infrastructure.
Can I add one thing here?
Sure.
Just something Andre said struck me also earlier. He said that 2.5% of their market share, I think, in the U.S. is electric, and then it was either 5% Asia and Europe, and then 10% in the other. And it struck me, along with the arrival comments, that if we expect to hit higher numbers, we have to have the infrastructure. And historically, the U.S. has spent 2 to 3% of GDP on infrastructure over the last 30 years, 5 to 6% in Europe, and 8 to 9% in Asia. And you might be able to argue they overspend a little bit. But I think you will see a correlation between the infrastructure upgrades and the money spent, and not spent, actually, we should not use that term, invested. Invested to stimulate private sector growth, but also to stimulate consumer buy-in. And so I think that's exactly what this administration is doing, and we have to do it as fast as humanly possible.
All right, I think it might be back to my turn for a question, and I know we're running out of time here, but really wanted to bring in the critical minerals piece, and not just the mining part of it, which gets a good bit of attention, probably should get even more attention, but the processing piece and the manufacturing part of that as well. And Rod, if I could bring you into the conversation, but certainly if others want to comment on this as well, just talk to us a little bit about the importance of the secure, reliable supply of critical minerals, how to think about the demand that we're going to need to supply going forward. Obviously huge business opportunities, but we want to make sure we avoid challenges in that supply chain, near term, medium term, and thinking longer term as well. And certainly we've been very clear in this administration of trying to onshore those supply chains for business opportunities here, but also for security reasons as well. talk to us about the progress that we've had on that and some of the pieces of legislation, but also gaps and other challenges that we still need to really focus on.
Absolutely, and I will keep this brief. So thanks for the question. Look, since Secretary Granholm's visit to us back in April, that seems like 10 years ago. You know, everything's accelerated that quick. Besides what happened in August, obviously the IRA took it into hyper speed. You know, everything moving forward. So we're producing now. We have an optimization plant, so we are producing lithium right now at a steady state. I guess, you know, the crying shame, to simplify this, is to put that lithium hydroxide product into a super sack, put it on a train, truck, ship, send it to China or South Korea, then send it back, you know, as a cathode material, as I mentioned before. What has happened is that now the cathode active material producers, the cathode materials, you know, precams, etc., are working closely with us, with our customers, GM and Stellantis, on I guess, a clean energy campus, where we produce two things. Obviously, besides lithium, we produce energy or power. We'll produce 1.1 gigawatts of energy in a very impoverished community, the Imperial Valley in California, that desperately needs the jobs and everything else. So I think indirectly, without even knowing it, you know, we're all trying to figure this out together because it's just unprecedented what's going on. But indirectly with the IRA, and I think some of the very, very clever, smart strategy that's been put behind that has really accelerated that into a whole nother mode. So we know now, just by removing the bagging plants that we have to put in, holding, you know, $200 million in inventory, the time of shipping and risk and all those sorts of things, and removing those straight away commercially makes sense. You know, that's how we're going to lower the levelized cost of some of these raw materials, at least we know, cathode, and accelerating the timeline so that we're producing lithium in 40 minutes, you know, in real time from this brine. So there's an enormous opportunity, but I'll put a caveat: we don't know what we don't know, but we really appreciate the support, you know, from DOE, the federal administration, the state, the whole industry itself, auto all the way through to OEM. I think we're all moving in the same direction. It's not really a competitive environment anymore. Everyone's genuinely trying to do it onshore in the United States and as quick as possible. I'd say the biggest challenge, if I only had one little major ask, would be time to permit. Time to permitting is one of the biggest challenges, because time, we really need to deliver product in 2024, 25, and you start to see the ramp up demands really peaking into 2027. It is aggressive, and I think the auto manufacturers would agree that the rate of sale and actually demand for products as it filters down to us is quadrupled in 1 year. You know, it really has from the offtake point of view. So it's a great challenge to be able to be part of.
Thanks, Rod. Super helpful. John?
Yeah, maybe just jumping in, it is pretty phenomenal in the Inflation Reduction Act, the production tax credit for EV batteries, and you know, an incentive there that may reduce the cost of batteries by 20 to 30%. What a phenomenal policy. But Keith, I'd like to get your perspective maybe on that last question. You know, you're going to be restarting a lithium mine, and that was in North Carolina. At one point you said it provided all the lithium we needed in North America. What's your sense of the greater outlook for lithium production in North America now with these fantastic policies in place?
It's a good question. The policies help a lot. So there's the upstream, the mining, and then there's the processing. So we're going to have conventional quarries, and we're going to be mining spodumene, essentially. That's the mineral that contains the lithium, and turning that into a spodumene concentrate that will then turn into lithium hydroxide that goes into the batteries. We're going to do that in North Carolina. In Tennessee, we're just going to have the chemical plant, and we're going to process spodumene concentrate that we'll import from places like Ghana and Quebec, where we have investments. So I guess just a few things I would highlight. Number one, it's unfortunately unlikely, at least for a decade or so, and we'll need some real discoveries, that we'll ever be self-sufficient upstream in the U.S. It could happen. It all depends on lucky geology, perhaps, but based on the projects that are in the pipeline now, we're not going to have nearly enough of our own material. So converting material from other parts of the world is important. Right now, 100% of the spodumene concentrate produced in the world is produced in Australia. And 100% of that is shipped to China to be converted. And that's starting to change. The Australians are starting to build their downstream conversion facilities, but maybe some of that material can come here to be converted. And the IRA certainly makes the U.S. that much more competitive. I think we'll see a lot of people doing that. Certainly makes our Tennessee project that much more competitive. So it's I think really smart legislation. And from our perspective, in terms of the tax credits, I think we only get them if we invest $700 million in Tennessee, employ a lot of people, produce a lot of material to electrify the business. The other thing I'll say is I think the upstream part of the business is critical because it's the hardest one to change and to move fast. So it takes a decade minimum from kind of first drill hole to production of battery quality lithium. So you can build a car plant in a couple of years, you can build a battery plant in a couple of years, you can build a cathode plant. It's 8, 10, 15, 20 years to build the raw material. So having, to kind of build that out, so having incentives to do more of it here and elsewhere is important. I think that'll be ultimately the constraint. I don't think demand will be a constraint. I think everybody will want an electric car by 2025 or 30 for sure. I drive an electric car, they're just better, smoother, quieter, faster. We won't be able to make them, I think, in large part because of the raw materials. But the more we do with charging, the more we do with, onshoring kind of the production activity, I think the better off we'll be.
Okay, great. And then I guess final question for all the panelists is what excites you the most about the rate of progress in the EV and battery sectors? And what, if you could pick one or two challenges, what would you pick? Tracy, you want to start?
Sure. I think what excites me is the pace of change. Feels faster, and I see it in our businesses, in our battery business, in our hydrogen business. We barely can keep up, which is a good place to be. It's better than the alternative. And so I think we started off talking about where we were a few years ago, and I think the pace has accelerated in a way that feels exponential, and that is exciting, and it's a good spot. Challenges, infrastructure. And I have a feeling I'm not going to be the only one to say that, but I think we have a feeling that if you build it, they will come and we will be ready. And it's just a matter of this whole of government approach that I know you're working on. I know everyone here is committed to, of bringing together the electric utilities, the commissions, the permitters, the minerals. All of these pieces need to come together to make this energy transition. None of these things can be done independent of each other, and so that's why I'm happy to be here today.
Great. Why don't we go online? Andre?
Yeah, thanks. And I'll be brief. In terms of what excites me most, it's got to be the products and the potential for the products that the pace of development provides. Electric vehicles are providing customers with capabilities we didn't have before. The Ford Pro charging on board allows you to charge your tools, your work site, your tailgate from your vehicle. There's vehicle to grid capability, and so as we continue to enhance developments in the vehicles and the batteries, growing range and growing capability is something that excites me. In terms of challenges, I'll associate myself with the comments of Rod and Keith. Definitely supply chain as it relates to sourcing critical minerals. We saw with the chip shortage, demand is high, but you don't have the critical components, then you're parking vehicles. And it's too important, the timing is too short. We've got to find a way to break constraints, get some permitting reform so that we can support the supply chain here domestically in the U.S.
Great. Mike, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. As far as what excites me, somewhat similar to the previous comments, the rate of change, but I would say specifically the pace in commercial vehicles. I've been really pleased to see in the U.S., both at the federal and several state governments, an understanding of how big an impact getting to zero emission commercial vehicles can have both on overall emissions as well as quality of life in our dense urban centers. So that very much excites me. As far as challenges, we're making great progress, but we have to remember we're at the beginning of this, and to reach the goals that we've set As a nation, we need to stay very aggressive on educating people about all the benefits of electric vehicles.
Great. Thank you very much for that. And Rod?
Yeah, what excites me, I mean, is validation by industry. CTR have been a private company, but we've sold annual production of 120,000 tonnes per year, lithium hydroxide, to American companies. So that sense of validation, these are 10 plus year take pay contracts. So that is great. The other exciting part about being a mineral based or thermal based resource is our manganese concentrates that we've figured out. We're recovering manganese at 5 times the rate of lithium. So, you know, then another battery metal, plus then you go down the rabbit hole to zinc. So, you know, I mentioned it earlier, the supply chain, I think in the coming months will be telling how we pull that together and how far down the rabbit hole we go. As far as beyond just removing that super sack, we want to delete that and get really to the world's first end-to-end clean energy campus. I think that's very, very achievable. And of course, thank you. The IRA has really helped accelerate that to light speed. Again, my only biggest challenge, I would say, is time and it's permitting. Time is going to kill projects and opportunities. The auto industry need to make decisions. They have to make decisions. They're selling the cars. But if we can't supply the product, that's going to be the crying shame of it all. So, thank you.
And Gabe?
Yeah, I guess what I'm most excited about is everybody seems to be paddling in the same direction for the first time. And I think this administration's catalyzed, it's utilities, private sector, states, cities. Working in the private sector a couple years ago, cities didn't have electrification plans for the most part. States, some did, many didn't. That's all changed. So that idea that everybody has, it's a foregone conclusion that we're moving to a zero emission future makes a huge difference instead of debating it and before getting to that next step. In terms of the challenges, I would say the context sensitive design needed, the difference between the rural, suburban, or exurban, suburban, urban, small town, Indian reservation is significant, and they need different things. They all need mobility, they all need transportation services, but figuring that out with them, which means letting them have a lot of input and decide what they need is important. And I think that ties into Justice 40 and the whole focus on equity. And it's not just going to be about getting everybody to go out and do a one-for-one swap from an ICE vehicle to an EV. A lot of people in cities don't own vehicles, right? So it's about electric buses, it's about electric school buses, it's about micromobility and electric bikes and all of those things. And I think we're going to be getting into that more in the next, over the next couple of years, which is really exciting. And the other challenge, which is also exciting as an opportunity, is seeing how the business models shake out in this industry. And there's a lot of different types of business models, but particularly the consumer and B2B models. And then how the contracting shakes out with states and local jurisdictions and EVSPs and stuff. But again, challenging, yes, but also very exciting in terms of how it's going to work and the different models we can test.
Yeah, great. And Keith?
Sure, I'll be quick. What I find exciting is every day getting up, working to transform two huge industries, the transportation industry and the energy industry. And I think in terms of risk, and I've been at this 6 years, and 2 years ago it didn't feel quite so inevitable like it does today. I mean, So in terms of risks, to me, the only real risk is time. It's going to take time. I think everyone will drive an electric vehicle in 20 years, if not 10 years or sooner. I think it's all going to happen. I feel really good about it. I think it's sort of unstoppable at this stage, particularly here in the U.S. And it's great that everyone's focused on it. And just exciting place to be.
Yeah, great. Deputy Secretary Turk, if I could just offer my perspective on that and then hand it back over to you for closing remarks. But, I think there is this sense now, and I like the way you framed things at the beginning. 2 years ago, what it looked like, the U.S. was not in the Paris Accord and things were a little bit different. Boy, what a difference 2 years makes. And it is feeling inevitable now. We're seeing with our 300 plus member companies, which includes a number of investment firms, that now they see the where policy is heading. The market signal has been sent. It's a question of not if it's going to happen, but how fast it's going to happen. It's impressive that in the light duty market, we've seen EV sales double in the last year. And we're just at the beginning point with the commercial vehicle sector. And I think they're going to quickly catch up because that business case is going to be there for so many vehicles, particularly those operating 200 miles or less per day. So super exciting. And I think what I'm also so encouraged about is the comprehensive nature that we're now pursuing an approach that accelerates the growth of the industry, that's going to help bring down greenhouse gases, improve air quality, but then it's also going to create a lot of domestic jobs, good quality jobs, and also prepares us from a national security perspective that we're developing these resources and materials here as much as we can.
Incredibly well put, John. And let me just do 3 quick things in wrapping up this just phenomenal discussion. One, I'd like to announce that people should look under their chairs, and there's an award of a Maki for the lucky, but that's not the way DOE rolls. You don't need to look under your chair. I said I'd like to, but I can't do that. Secondly, let's just give a big round of applause here, not only for John for some excellent co-moderating, for Keith, for Tracy, for Mike, for Rod, for Andre, but also for Ali and Stephanie and all the organizers of this session as well. So if we could just do a big round of applause for everybody. And then third and last, just want to pick up, and Gabe, you mentioned it, and put it not just as a historic opportunity. It is historic, what we all face together, but you mentioned it as a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I personally feel that way. I think others, certainly that seems to have come across in our other panelists. I know certainly others of us working here at DOE, and maybe just to take a step back and really internalize what that means. We've got challenges. I think our panelists raised some terrific and really stubborn challenges, whether it's the permitting side, the supply chains, the infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. The one thing I'd like to highlight, and Keith, you mentioned this, is just the time and the pace. We don't have time to wait for things to organically happen 30 years, 40 years into the future. We've got an opportunity, a historic opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really accelerate and compress those timelines. It's only going to happen if it's government and the private sector working, sharing information, having the kind of real conversation that we had here today, and the partnerships that are being forged as we speak to really go forward in that instance. So my hope is we all look back on this once-in-a-generation, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for all our respective roles. And we were part of something really, really, truly worth putting in the sweat equity in particular. We're putting in the equity, putting in the government resources to private sector resources, but something we can really be proud of as part of our careers, to really be part of this revolution that's happening right now. And to compress those timelines, to do this as quickly as we can, as thoroughly as we can, not just for climate benefit, but for economic benefit, for job benefit, just to do all those, achieve all those incredibly important missions. So thanks to our panelists, thanks for everyone, thanks for all of you being here. And for those who are in this area or not in this area yet, join in and be part of something truly, truly remarkable. Thanks, everybody.
Only if you promise to share.